Welcome back to the MVP podcast. I'm here today with my main man Weezy and a very special guest out in the US of A, Bridget Case. How are we doing, Bridget?
I'm good, hanging in during this quarantine. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We're in lockdown in the UK, so we're
Yeah,
to homes. So the scenery is a little different to the usual studio setup, but we're doing.
yeah, definitely. I feel you. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast.
No, you're very
No
welcome.
worries.
Bridget, I've got a quick question for you because the name is kind of cool. I've never heard the name After Orange Slices. So where did that name come from?
Well, when you're playing youth sports as a kid, I mostly think about soccer, what you guys, refer to as football.
Yeah.
I always remember a teen mom having snacks at the end of the game, or that's kind of what you like think of, especially if you're not that into the game. But regardless, like you play hard. Once the game is done, you go and you get your snacks. And when I was a kid, it was always orange slices. I mean, sure, there was like Gushers and all the little Capri Suns but I always remember orange slices. So for me, that was such a happy childhood memory for remembering after the game, after orange slices. That was kind of my metaphor and where I was taking that.
Fair enough. Well, it's a cool name. I mean, I've not heard it before. It's unique, and you do remember it After Orange
Yeah.
Slices.
Yeah.
It's got a good meaning behind it as well, man. It's like
Right.
there's actually a good thought behind it, to be fair. Why not?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Bridget, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, where did you start?
Oh gosh, that's a long story. Well, I guess long story short, I always knew that I wanted to be a journalist. I always had this like very hard pull between wanting to start my journalism career and retiring as a professional cheerleader. So that was a really hard thing for me because I danced my entire life. I danced for 22 years.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
and then professionally with the Chargers. And so, when you dedicate that much of your life to one thing, like changing into anything is going to be so difficult, that transition. And so when I started this podcast, I really wanted to focus on that, like people who have made a difficult transition similarly. But for me, when I first jumped into journalism, I was hopping around different small markets, and I started at a small NBC station. Then I went and worked for a tennis team, and then I went to a CBS station. I was the sports anchor there. So I was hopping around all these different markets. And what I was finding was that I would, get better, I would improve, but then I would plateau for a bit. And you're not making much money at these places. I mean, they just don't pay you enough for all of the work that you're doing because you're doing like 7 people's jobs. And which I love because you learn a lot. Like, you're running up and down the sidelines, covering games with the camera, and then you're setting the camera up, turning around, doing a live shot by yourself, like, because they're trying to cut budget, cut the budget down and everything. So you learn a lot. But what I was really realizing was that cable TV was so behind on the digital media movement, and no one's consuming media on the televisions anymore. They're just not. Most of the emails that I would get back in from viewers were from people 80 years old and up, right? So most of our like we would cover a lot of high school sports at my last station that I was at. And the reason, like, we pushed Twitter so hard because the kids only would wait for their highlights to come out on Twitter. They wouldn't watch the highlights on the actual show.
Exactly.
Right? So when I left my last station, I was really thinking like, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else. But for me, what I realized was that I had wasted all this time focusing so much on cable TV and then just like putting out a couple highlights on Twitter, but not really noticing where I could build an audience and where I could build a voice. And for me, that's what I found with Instagram. And I hadn't been on Instagram for 2.5 years. Because it was like, for me, it was such a toxic mental environment, and it really was a big trigger for me. So when I decided I was going to start a podcast and start my own platform, that was hard for me. I just decided, okay, like I got to do it. I got to do it for the brand, and I've done these kinds of things before. And especially when I had stopped dancing, I was so depressed, so I was like, okay, I've been through things, we can do it, and it seems so silly, but when something is such a huge mental trigger, it's a blockage. But
Mhm.
I found a way to kind of get around that and promote positivity with my platform, that the response was so positive that there was like nothing that could push that could push back against what I was doing. And it was really amazing because I was seeing this huge response from people who only consume content on their phones. And that's
Mhm.
kind of how I got into this. And I started my first podcast in August, and then now I co-host another podcast called Turbo Talk with Super Bowl champion Robert Turbin.
You
and
know.
then um and then I've got a couple other things in the works too that like I can't quite talk about yet, but it's just, things, it's the domino effect, right? Like
Yeah.
once you just kind of put something out there and people, figure out what you're doing, even though it might be so new. I had no idea what I was doing with this, like this whole side of things, because it's so different than television. But yeah, it's just been a fun adventure. And for me, I love that. And also such a blessing in disguise when it comes to dealing with COVID-19, because I'm able to still function from home like you guys are.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with all of that, that's fantastic. But was it scary making that transition? And when you're thinking, I'm going to go into something completely new here, something I haven't done, something I don't really know too much about, and it's a new age, it's a new market. Did you find that scary?
Yeah, mostly because the market is so saturated, right? So how do you make yourself stand out as a sports podcast, a lifestyle podcast, a business podcast, whatever you're promoting? What makes you different? You have to find your niche.
Hmm.
And that especially was difficult. I thought that I would have this huge leg up because I'm like, I'm a journalist, like whatever, this is gonna be easy, right? That's not the case, because there's so much that goes on,
Hmm.
on the other side of things. I'm still learning. And I mean, the thing is you're doing it right if you're still learning. But I really do believe that sports content is all generated towards digital, generated towards this audio movement with podcasts, that I think anybody who is getting in at this time and wants to start a podcast, it's the smart move to do it. It's scary because you got to be all in, or just like not care that
Yeah.
much, and so and that's the thing for me, is I care. Like when I do something, I do it to 1,000%.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that was definitely the most difficult part in the beginning, especially people also just being like, oh, is that all you do? Whatever. And I'm like, I'm taking a chance on myself. Like I had to move back in with my parents, move to a different state. Like, I did not want to do that. I had my set like adult life for a while that I love, but for me to take a chance on myself, this is what it took. And, not worrying about making money for a bit. And all of a sudden the pieces start to fall together once you just stop worrying about what all the haters say. Because I definitely get that. And it's from friends too. And that goes for anybody who's in any industry.
Oh, no, I agree. And I think that dovetails nicely with what we talked about today, which is mindset, it's mentality, it's the motivation, it's the driving factor. It's what makes the ordinary people separate from the greats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it's about. So yeah, I wanted to touch on that because obviously you've been around professional athletes for most of your adult life, as you say. And who would you say surprised you the most in terms of their work ethic, their levels of determination, the levels they would go to sort of prove that they're the best?
Ooh, that's a good one. Hmm. Okay. I would say that when I was at the Chargers, I have a ton of respect for Antonio Gates, because
Yeah.
I feel like he was this, future Hall of Famer who was constantly trying to be pushed out of the league by all the younger voices, because people would say, oh, he's getting old. He's like 90 years old, basically, in the league, even when he was still, 35. And of
Mhm.
course, now he just announced his retirement at the beginning of this year, and sat out all season hoping for a call. But to me, I never realized this really until I was with the Chargers, but the resilience and the bravery that he posts is just incredible. And that, I mean, stems from his time where he was a college basketball player. He wasn't even, didn't even care about football, and at a tiny school, and then all of a sudden makes in the NFL undrafted. But his mentality, just to watch him, honestly, like what we were just saying, kind of block out all the haters, not really care about what everyone's saying, that, oh, he's old, he can't catch anymore, his bones don't move the same way. And he just like did not care what anyone would say. And it was the same, that was like his chemistry with Philip Rivers, was that they just worried about getting the job done on Sundays, and he just worried about like his legacy in general, and didn't worry about the stats. And I loved that, because I had so much respect for him, because so many people would rag on him constantly because he wasn't the same player. And to me, that's so sad, because, well, no one's going to be in their prime, forever. You're not Tom, and not everyone's Tom Brady. And even him, but still, I have so much respect for him not cowering and falling. Like, I see so many players who end up just being pushed out.
Yeah, I mean, coming to that Antonio Gates one, it's like for the last 4 or 5 years, all I ever heard was, oh, he's going to retire, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, oh, the Chargers are going to release him, this and that. And then every year he puts up record numbers. But
exactly.
But the one I wanted to ask you was Philip Rivers, because he came through the same draft class as Eli and Big Ben, and they both got 2 Super Bowl rings.
I know.
Now, what kind of pressure was that like for him? Because every year, like last year, not this year's NFL season gone, the season before that, they had quite a good record, and obviously before they met Baltimore Ravens, and then everyone was projecting, oh, they're going to get to the Super Bowl final, the Super Bowl, should we say, and then it sort of like petted out kind of thing.
Yeah. No, you're so right. I was ready. I was like, I'm going to go as a fan. Like, I'm not even gonna worry about trying to cover anything. I'm like, this is happening. And, the 2018 season, that was a killer. And I think people hate on Philip Rivers so much, mostly because I think that they look at his attitude as like a crybaby or something. And to me, if you hear him on, like, when he's mic'd up, this stuff he says is hilarious. It's so funny. He's just trash talking. He's just joshing with people. Like, he's just trying to make fun and have a good time out there. He's just a big kid, but he gets such a bad rap because he's so passionate. And exactly like, he doesn't have the championships like Eli or Big Ben. And that sucks, because he hasn't had every single great piece around him. Sure, like, they could have got it done when he had LT, but still, it's one of those things where I have so much respect for him that, again, he also has kept going. He has had the most consecutive starts as a starting quarterback in like all of the NFL, and it's just astounding to me how people still rag on him. I always tell people, I'm like, draft Rivers, like in their fantasy drafts. I'm like, draft him. He doesn't get hurt. Like, he's reliable. I don't care if maybe he doesn't put up record numbers each game, but I'm like, he is your most reliable quarterback. He's not going to get hurt. He's safe. Like, and he's such a humble guy that, again, he just cares more about like the team and is not so worried about, the individual accolades. And I respect that a lot. And I especially respect that he didn't just retire this year. He still wants to play and prove people wrong. I think that that's amazing, especially when his whole career has been with San Diego, Los Angeles. Like, to me, that's so brave not to just be pushed out, because I look at Eli and I think, yeah, sure, he has Super Bowl ring, but he was kind of pushed out of the organization, right? And great, he got to go out on his own and make his retirement announcement, but everybody knew it was coming. And to me, Philip Rivers really resembles the guy that's like, no, I'm not going to back down from this fight until I get what I want, until I've given it my all. And I love that. And I think we can learn so much from guys like that.
Well, that brings me on. Sorry, that brings me on to the next question I wanted to ask around that. What makes a good leader? Because with Philip Rivers, the issue is he's not won, and they're always so close, and the numbers are never the best. But he is a good guy because they always talk about when he retires, he's probably the next guy in the CBS analyst chair, like Tony Romo. He's probably the next guy because he's so funny. He's got the charisma, the personality. But on the field, what makes a good leader? And is Philip Rivers a good leader?
All I have heard from these guys, you know, I did an interview with Michael Badgley, the kicker for the Chargers at the Super Bowl this year. And we had a long chat, and he was just, especially afterwards, we were talking about it. He, like, as a young guy, has thought that Philip Rivers is just a fantastic leader, especially not just in the locker room, but outside, because he's just kind of has that like dad vibe and is always positive and cares about everybody and has brought all of these different groups, different guys from, you know, different parts of the world, maybe different experiences, and they all love him. They all respect him. He has never caused drama in the locker room. Every single guy on that team has always had respect for him, and it's unbelievable. They just laugh at him with the trash talking, but because he doesn't cuss, if anyone on here doesn't know that, so it's hilarious. But because the words he comes up with are just like not real words. But but seriously, like everything I have heard from anyone who has ever played with him has all been positive. So it's hilarious to me how the people who just rag on him are really the people that don't know him, right? And so that's why I always am just kind of like, again, like you never really know someone until you meet them. And yeah, so I think that he's gotten a lot of he's got a bad rap during his whole career, and I honestly don't think that he deserves that. I think that he deserves a lot more praise. You know, he and Antonio Gates have the most touchdowns between a tight end and a quarterback. I think I got to double check the numbers, but as of last season, whatever, a year ago. But still, it's like no matter what he does, people don't respect that. And I think to make a good leader, you have to not care about that. You have to not worry about the reciprocation, you know, somebody saying thank you all the time. You have to do it because you love it and you're passionate about it. And I think that that's why he's a good leader. And anyone who I've seen in the sports world or not, who is a good leader, a good boss, does it because they love it and because they care and not because they're asking for anything in return.
Now, see, that's the amazing thing. Like, not a lot of, like, I watch NFL, I've been watching it for like 11, 12 years now. And not like in the UK, not a lot of people know that Eli Manning and Philip Rivers' careers are like sort of intertwined because Eli Manning was drafted. Yeah,
From
Eli
the
Manning
beginning.
was drafted. Yeah, he was drafted to the San Diego Chargers, refused, and then got traded for Philip Rivers to the New York Giants. But like them two are, for me, Eli Manning's like one of my favorite players, and he gets the world of stick. The same with Philip Rivers. They get like the amount of stick and abuse that they get off like sports analysts, whatever what show you watch, and then they're saying, "Oh, just can't get it done." Eli Manning's not the perfect leader, but I think their attitudes are perfect, like, because it's just like water off a duck's back. They're like, okay, you said that about me. I'll go and get it done. I just think Philip Rivers has never really been like, whereas Eli Manning's had like your Cruises, he's had your Michael Strahans, he had the the two-finger defense in 2007, and then that carried on into 2011 for the Super Bowl. I don't think Philip Rivers has ever had the team around him, and it's just, that's why I think for me, he will get that stick, and then people always look at it and say, oh, the other two quarterbacks that came out of his draft class have got 2 rings. He hasn't. NFL doesn't necessarily work like that. But his numbers are miles better than Eli Manning's when you look at it.
Exactly. No, and that's the thing. The individual stats are great, but he just has not had the guys around him, especially has not had a strong offensive line the last however many years, especially after losing his, longtime starting center, Nick Hardwick. And so when you don't have that kind of protection and what you're used to, they've been playing around with those pieces and then people get hurt. And it's like the Chargers, the story is like, God, we've so many injuries. It's like ridiculous. But again, I just think that his attitude is really impressive. And again, there's been so many coaching changes. There's just been so much turnover.
Yeah.
You can't really find a rhythm when that's happening, and I think the only people that were really able to do it were the Niners last year. So it's like, I think, you know, turnover can be a great thing. It can also be really difficult on a team. And so I don't know.
It'll be interesting because him going to the Colts, they've got an
Mhm.
offensive line and they've got cap
Mhm.
space to do something. So
Yeah.
I'll be watching that one to see. I'm one of them ones. I'm hoping he gets a ring just for the career he's had. Like even when
And
you, like,
Frank Wright is a great coach. I
Yeah.
trust him a lot. Like, I think that that's a great match. I really do believe that they kind of think the same. So
Yeah.
it's an old school mentality, you know? So, yeah.
Even when you look at,
Sorry, go Weezy, sorry.
no, I was gonna say just like one last point. Even when you look at his life and you actually find out the guy's actually got 9 kids and stuff like that. It's just it's just, you could tell he's just genuinely I've never heard any sports analyst or anybody that's retired or anything say anything bad about him. So
Yeah,
for
it's
me,
just,
I'm hoping he
It's
gets
just
it.
fans. It's just fans.
Yeah. And it's all about winning for fans. If they don't win it, like if memory's short for fans,
Exactly.
you're not winning, then they forget everything. Eli Manning in New York absolutely destroyed him, even though he's bought him 2 Super Bowl rings. So that's
Mhm.
just so it's just fans in it. With
But
if you don't win,
what have you done for me lately?
that's it. That's the one.
that's all sports. Just one last question on this part of it. Does Philip Rivers get into the Hall of Fame for you if he doesn't win a ring?
I had this discussion the other day with somebody, actually a couple players, and they were laughing at me because they're like, is he? And I'm like, yeah, in my book, hello, he has put up record numbers that most guys have never seen in the league. Again, he is a consistent starter. He has played for so long and done so much for this league that I think a lot of current, more modern day fans don't even realize. Yeah, he is an ambassador. And so I think that there's so much more that goes into a vote with that than just the wins and the rings. But yeah, I mean, he's been part of some pretty memorable moments. And I really think like LT wouldn't have been the great player that he was without Rivers. Same with Gates. And if those two guys are you know, shoe in, like I just think that Rivers needs to be there as well. And you know, it's, to me, it's a no-brainer, but that's also because I've watched him play. I've seen his mentality. There's so much, like, this guy's so positive, it's ridiculous. Like, I just wish I could be more like that. Like, I work on that every day. I'm like, okay, I just need to, you know, get up and go, and I'm gonna try to be as positive as Rivers. But yeah, I think there is so much that goes into it, so much more than we realize than just the accolades.
Just a quick point on that, the Hall of Fame kind of thing. For me, I've never understood how it works because you get people that have 1 rings and then they say, oh, their numbers are not great. And then you've got people whose numbers are great, but have not won 8 rings. And then they say, oh, he's a Hall of Famer or he's a shoehorn for the Hall of Fame. So for me, like, I'd say, yeah, 100%. When you look at his numbers, his like reception yards, everything like that, he gets in for that simple fact. And like NFL, like I said before, it's not just down to that one player. There's like, do you know what I mean? You've got your offense, your defense, your special teams. One silly play and someone missing their assignment, and that's it. Like you're going home. So for me, for what he did as a personal level and what he's achieved, I think he gets in.
Right. Exactly. I agree with you.
It's it's a perfect time to switch the conversation onto basketball because people say Melo's going to get in. Carmelo Anthony. I love Carmelo. I'm a massive Carmelo.
Me too. Yeah.
I want him to get in, and I think he should get in. But it's the same kind of conversation. Although you can't take the 2 sports, you have to.
He was kind of the Antonio Gates up until this year. You know, just waiting. You know.
Mm-hmm. Does someone like Melo get in? Do you think definitely it's a lock?
Absolutely. Well, to me, again, the name, the legend, what he has done for the league. I mean, people in New York love him, but just it's not. He's just a really good guy. Like, people love him off the court. Fans love him off the court. Some people, I think, were so, I don't know. Some people were weird about, like, when before he went to the Blazers, like, people were, you know, I think judging him a lot and just, you know, saying stuff that wasn't really true. But I do think that he is one of those guys that is in the same way. Like, he doesn't really care. Like, he loves his wine. Like, he's this big wine connoisseur. Like, he has other kind of hobbies and that make him really interesting. And I think that, to me, that's always what makes like a really good player, is that their mindset is so strong, and yet they have all these other things that make them really interesting, you know. And he's smarter than people realize. Like, he's a total wine nerd. He knows so much. It's so funny. And I really do believe that the personal part plays a huge part into getting in.
No, absolutely. I'm going to take you back 10, maybe 11 years. We're in Akron, Ohio. We're in Cleveland. We're in the state of Cleveland. And there's a man by the name of LeBron James. And the world is against him. And everyone is saying he's a choker. Got it. He doesn't have it, what it takes. The Michael Jordan comparisons, you can throw them out the window. He's not won a ring. And then all of a sudden he moves to Miami. And it all changed. It doesn't all change straight away, but it changes. Now, from someone like yourself who's been in the game for a long time, who's had ups and downs, who's battled through, and who's here today, what do you think it was that got LeBron from Cleveland LeBron, who couldn't get a ring, who couldn't get over the hump, to Miami LeBron, who's now the face of the league, the man who they can't crush, they can't break, the man who's always smiling? What do you think it was that got him through that?
Okay. Honestly, I think that he had to develop a ton of strength when he made that move, because think of the scrutiny he got from the hometown crowd. The jerseys burned everywhere, which a lot of people were regretting that when he came back. But I think he developed this really tough skin that wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna be cocky, I'm the best player, blah blah blah. Like, not just talk. I think it was more so, okay, like, this is what everyone thinks of me. You're just gonna make me work harder. You're gonna put that fire into my ass, and I'm gonna go and prove you wrong.
So do you think he always had that, or do you think because of the situation, it kind of he grew into that? What do you think?
I think he grew into it 100%. I really think he grew into it. I think also he was still at that point a little bit under shadows of other guys in the league, Kobe, and just still early, like, there was just that early time of LeBron. I think was just still a little bit experimental in people's eyes, and so I do really believe that, like, Miami set the precedent, but then once he came back to Cleveland and all the pieces fit together and people saw what he was doing off the court, again, like, comes back to the humanitarian issue. People were like, oh, this guy is a human. He is a good person. He's not just some cocky asshole who's out there, but who's out there, worrying about what have you done for me lately? Sure. I always say that you do have to have a strong ego if you're going to be a professional athlete. That's just what makes you a winner. But you have to know, when do I turn this part of me off? When do I learn to give a little bit and share a little? And I think that is what made him a better teammate and just more of a fan favorite in general over the years.
I don't think there's an athlete more scrutinized than LeBron, though, in anything he does.
Oh,
like,
totally.
whatever he puts up, whatever numbers he puts up is compared to Jordan. It's this, that. I think the league and the player power he's given the players in terms of like trades and what they can do and that, I think the league owes LeBron a lot, to be fair. I mean,
totally.
the NFL can learn a few things off him, but I just think mentality-wise, I think the guy is mentally. Yeah, he's lost finals that he should have won, but in terms of like his mentality and his strength, I think you can't never knock it. For me, I've always said it. I always say he's the GOAT for me. Well, many people disagree, but for me, he's the GOAT.
It reminds me of Simba. He was in the line. He's developing. He's a lion. He's a king, but he's developing into the king. He's the heir to the throne. But now, after the runs in Miami, going back winning in Cleveland, I think he's become grown Simba, and he's deservedly, He's got the crown. He's on top of the league. He's being disrespected at the minute with Kawhi and Giannis, but they deserve to be in the discussion because they're proving as to why.
Yeah, they're up and coming.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily say it's disrespect, but people say it's disrespect. But just going back onto the leadership, we've talked about Phillip Rivers, we've talked about LeBron. From these guys and all the guys you've watched and covered, what would you say is the top 3 traits for a good leader? Because, you know, we've had Kobe, who some people say his leading was leading by example. It was just, I'll grab you guys and we'll go and win it. LeBron, it's more vocal, it's communication. Phillip Rivers, it's, you know, follow me, we're all in this together. Eli Manning, it's more passive. So everyone's got a different style. But what would you say is the sort of the top 3, if you could put it into 3?
I would say, I would say, I think that a strong communication system is everything on a team, because when you're passive, that's how rumors start. That's how people on a team start feeling uncomfortable, and things that are non-existent become existent, and tensions rise. But a strong communication system from a leader, somebody who goes and checks in and is empathetic and says, hey, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? Like, what can I do for you? You know, again, it comes back to the part where you have empathy for somebody else and you care about like your teammate, but you're not worrying about something else in return. But having that communication and realizing what somebody is going through, and then speaking back and telling them what you're going through, whether it may be on the field when you're trying to call a play and something's going wrong, or you're just hanging out at dinner and like you can't order this, you can't figure out what to order. I just think that communication is everything, and that has been a huge issue, especially in the NFL, with so many guys who end up starting to trash talk on their teammates, right? Like, especially like before a guy gets traded or whatever. And you know, I think a lot back to like Pittsburgh and Green Bay, and just, you know, like, or like little shady comments that, like, even though I think Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but like the shady comments that he'll, you know, dish out about like Mike McCarthy. Yeah. It's just kind of like, to me, that's not a good leader, you know? Don't do that. So
coming to that, it's like Antonio Brown now. No team's touching him after he like what Juju Smith-Schuster sent him, and then he's published all the DMs out, the private saying, "Brother, I want to learn from you. Teach me this," and then the guys published him. I don't think there's going to be a single NFL team that's going to touch him.
Right, and that comes back to
And he tried using Tom Brady's name to try and get like, wherever Tom goes, I'm going, this and that. And Tom Brady, when you watch him like mic'd up or anything like that, if a play goes wrong and he knows it's not his fault, you hear him straight away saying, my bad, that one's on me, this and that. So for me, a great leader is what you said, is communication, especially in the NFL, where the world where you've come up. Like, you get guys that are just, especially when you watch mic'd up or anything like that, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, any of these great quarterbacks, when you watch them and what they say and how they communicate to their team. And a lot of the time, they take the stick and the blame when they know that the player's in the wrong position or not where they've asked them. So, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and that comes back to like my other trait that makes a great leader would be humility, and being able to accept responsibility or not, just take it because you're part of the team. So being humble and realizing when it's your time to shine and when it's maybe time to pass the ball to somebody else, like, just, I think that most leaders who are so successful have been dealt a big piece of humble pie in their life, whether they were really cocky in the beginning or maybe never were, but somebody taught them something, or they had some sort of revolutionary experience that I think, you know, kind of like was like, okay, get off your high horse and, you know, let's figure out how to really make sure that a team feels like you are their leader and you're not just out and in it for yourself. And like, so that is communication and humility. And then again, I think it's just mental toughness. I think being a strong leader, mental toughness is everything, especially as a professional athlete, because you have to put up with all the haters, fans, media, anyone who puts you down and says you can't do it. All these guys who have had coaches and said, oh, you're never going to make it to the league. You know, like Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team, right? Like, and it's players like that who defy the odds and push the boundaries because they've been told they can't, you know? So that mental toughness that they use to fuel their fire and push past and say, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to do it anyway, and be the best. That is what makes a really good leader and a really strong competitor.
I've got a question for you. It's a hypothetical. It's on the mental toughness. So let's go back maybe 15, 20 years when there was no social media, there was no Twitter, there was none of this.
Good old days.
Couldn't do stuff like this.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Do you think the NFL players, the basketballers, the football players, the soccer players, everybody, do you think that they would be as mentally tough if social media existed? Because a lot of the trolls, a lot of the haters, a lot of the hate mail, a lot of the spam, a lot of the abuse does come from social media, as well as the good stuff, the bad stuff as well. Do you think a lot of those guys, because there are a lot of tough guys there, the Charles Oakleys, the Michael Jordans, the Rodmans, the Drexlers, you know, there's so many I could go on and on and on. But do you think those guys would struggle with social media and the abuse that they would get in those days if they had social media, that is, or not?
I do. I don't think everybody would. I think that MJ is like the perfect example of a guy that would totally tune it out, and that's just his personality. But I think that majority of the guys who were able to stay so focused and tunnel visioned would have struggled mentally. I mean, you still see a lot of older players, like retired players, who don't have social media, and maybe they are, you know, analysts or whatever it may be. Like I still think that like Charles Barkley doesn't have Instagram, but you know, and he's still one of like the most hilarious, like well-known voices, even though he's not even playing ball. Mm-hmm. And I do think that social media takes a huge toll on you mentally, and you have to be very, very prepared and a strong competitor to deal with it. But I think it would have had a huge impact on the league at the time. I guess all sports. I think that sports would have been a lot different, and kind of I think it would have lost the magic of what classic sports have brought us, and those like classic old school memories, and a lot of the unknown also, like a lot of what players could get away with back then too. You know what I mean? Like there's so much that we don't know. Like I've even talked to guys who have been like, I cannot imagine if social media was around when I was playing, like I would not have like made a team, or you know what I mean? Things like that. It's just, so yeah, I do think it would have had a huge impact, not just on them mentally, but you know, maybe not making a team because something gets leaked or whatever it may be. So I bet you a lot of those guys are honestly really grateful that it wasn't out.
I don't think Jordan would have had the squeaky clean reputation that he so-called has if like every action of yours, especially if you're the best player, every action of yours is highlighted. I don't think he would have, do you know what I mean? Like imagine the actual reason why he was away certain games when he was in Atlantic City and stuff like that. For all that, imagine LeBron did that now, he'd get crucified. So it's just
totally.
Yeah, it's touch and go.
LeBron's an example of, I mean, apart from the decision, what else can we say bad about LeBron? There's not much. There's not much at all.
Yeah, but that decision was the right decision.
No, but I'm just saying that's the only thing he's vilified.
But people, that's when people really started vilifying him.
Yeah.
What else has he done? He's never been in the press for anything bad, and we don't want to get into that too much, but
it's like little comments, but again, that comes back from social media, and it's like tweets, and it's just ridiculous. Like, oh my gosh, they take one tweet out of context, you know, and so it's that's so frustrating. But take the time to get to know the guy, you know, watch his show, watch The Shop, you know, watch other things that he's done, like look at his stuff that he does with Uninterrupted. Like, just look at everything else that he's put out there with the Promise School, the I Promise School. And like, just again, the stuff that makes him a human being. Look at the TikToks that he's doing right now with his children, you know? And so it's like, how can you hate on a guy who is human and does all that kind of stuff when like we all make mistakes every single day?
I've got one last question, Bridget, before I do let you go, because I know we've taken a lot of your time today. But what advice would you give to the listeners out there and the followers out there in this quarantine time where everyone's locked down and they probably think, oh, I can't go and chase my dreams. I can't go and achieve what I want to achieve. What would you say to somebody now to get them off the sofa or out of the bed and go and do something for themselves?
Well, I would say that not being able to achieve your dreams while we're all stuck inside is absolute bullshit, because I am in here working on my dreams as we speak. And I think if you take the time to just process what you want, maybe you like have an idea of something in the future, but figure out a strategy and what's actionable. There are so many things that you can do from home right now. Whether it may be starting your own business, looking like finding a new passion. I'm astounded by so many people who say, oh, I'm bored at home. I'm bored at home. And I'm like, how can you be bored? I don't have enough time in the day right now. I have to tell myself to like put the laptop down and stop working because I have so many ideas. And I'm like, yes, it's like I gained time, as much as I'm not happy that people are passing away. And, this is obviously a very serious time. But for those people who are healthy, take advantage of this time. Use it. Stop complaining. Don't sit there on your ass all day. Get up and do something. Figure out whether it's online or not, there is something that you can do to advance yourself in whatever space you want to be in, professionally, personally, whatever. There's something that you can do. Be proactive and just go out and do it. Just try it. And if you're going to fail, who cares? Because we're not out in public right now anyway. If a couple people laugh at you online, oh, so what? What's going to happen? You have to really have that don't really care mentality to not worry about failing so much.
I love that. And it kind of summarizes about you've got to be strong. You've got to try. And that's the thing. Don't be afraid to try, because, like yourself, not to bang on again, but you struggled. You had to go through things. I've had to go through things. Weezy had to go through things. Everybody else. But we are here today because we try. So on that note, I want to thank you, Bridget, for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking with us. Weezy, as always,
it's been
the link
pleasure.
to Bridget's socials below, so you'll find the link to your Instagram podcast.
Great.
And as Sosa, who's not here with us, I have to say, if you like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for great content. And as always, thank you so much, guys, and we'll be back again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.